Stakeholder.
In gambling, an independent party with whom each of those who make a wager deposits the money or counters wager.
A person with an interest or concern in something, especially a business.
In emergency management, any person or entity with a vested interest in the survival and recovery of a given community. You.
Welcome to Stakeholder Prepping.
Welcome back to Stakeholder Prepping, where you, yes, you, are the stakeholder in your own survival. We are your hosts, your ad hoc S2 with information that can save your life. I am Chris.
And I am your co-host at large, AC.
Yeah, and AC, you're on the road this week, so the audio might be a little funny, but that's what we're here for, is giving you information week by week by week, regardless of what kind of circumstances or conditions we're in, right?
I'm not taking the day off just because I got to travel. So yeah, let's hope it doesn't sound that objectionable. And if it does, just know that I am less happy to be here than you are to listen to shitty audio.
So from an undisclosed location, we definitely want to thank everyone who is listening in and who has written in with feedback and suggestions, especially off of the last episode, the AFAC episode. We've got a lot of really positive comments and questions on that. A lot of stuff is happening, and we've got some really cool things coming down the pipe. Don't want to quite give it away yet, but if you like free stuff and giveaways, definitely like, subscribe, share, get the word out, because there is some very, very cool stuff coming down the line. We know this isn't exactly cheap on your end. We do realize it's a huge time commitment for you to give us an hour a week, and we really do hope the info that we're giving you is useful and actionable. We want to be there for you when you need us most, and that's what we're doing today.
Yeah, and I absolutely, Chris, and a dovetail on that, like, yeah, this isn't cheap, and it's a huge time commitment for us, but I guess for everybody, I realize that you're giving us an hour a week to listen to us, so I absolutely appreciate that. We've had some really good positive feedback. We've had a lot of suggestions, and that means so much to us. It means a ton to me, and I know it means a lot to you, Chris, because we wouldn't do this just for fun. I love listening to you talk, but I wouldn't just sit here for an hour a week, and the amount of time and effort and money that it takes us. If we're putting in an hour here on the mic that you're hearing, that means that there's hours of research, and I'm not going to say we haven't, re-recorded an episode or two, but we've done that too. So we really are putting in the work, and this is for everybody listening.
Especially on this episode, I will say this is probably, would you say 12, 13 hours of research and work that's gone into this over the past 3 weeks between the two of us?
There was a lot of work on this one. It's very interesting. I even gave you some homework that we can talk about later, but no, this was something that I thought was extremely important. And because of that, I think we both really put the work in on this one.
Absolutely, we did. So, AC, I know this one's kind of your baby. What are we discussing today?
Okay, Chris. Yeah, here we go. This is the poop episode, or for the more highbrow crowd, the sanitation episode. And this is so incredibly important to me. And honestly, it should be one of the single most important aspects of prepping to anyone who thinks you could have a grid down situation for any length of time. You hear preppers all of the time talk about, like, what's important to prepare for. And 99 times out of 100, it's the exact same 5 items. It's food, water, shelter, warmth, weapons. Sometimes it's one or two of those things. Sometimes there's the mental aspect thrown in, like train or bow staff skills, but any self-described prepper, when you ask them, hey, what are the 5 things you need to survive, or what are the things you need to survive? It's those 5 items. It's some iteration of those 5 items. And, we all know that, I think most preppers, and probably ourselves included, we have this fantasy of just lone wolfing it with your 1911 and your M1 carbine and thinking that you're going to be perfectly fine forever, you know?
Just pull the Jason Bourne and call it good. I don't know if the 1911 is quite my go-to, and I don't have anything in 30 carbine, so I'll leave
But
you
the
on
M1
that side of
carbine's
the
growing
fence.
on you, isn't it? It's growing on
Uh,
you.
We'll talk about that a little more in the obligatory gun episode.
Okay.
That's fair.
Yep. Yep. But I think of the 1911 as sort of the iconic gun. Maybe it's not.
2 world wars.
Two World War. It's a Nazi meter. It is. It is the iconic gun. Although I think you had said something about the new prepper iconic gun is likely the Colt Python because that's Rick Grimes' gun, right? So
Yes,
yeah,
for sure. The value on Colt Pythons after The Walking Dead season 1.
through the roof.
Oh man,
It's
uh,
it's crazy. Everybody wants one. It's Rick Grimes' gun.
but there's only so much value in any gun, not just based on the ammo that you have for it or what you can reload or find or scavenge or whatever. There's only so much value in it because they are very specific tools, whereas something like sanitation is not just a tool, but a lifesaver.
No, you're right. And thanks for getting me back on track because I know we could just talk about guns for an hour, but it's true. Sanitation is the absolute least sexy part of preparedness. So we never see it in any of the movies, and it's barely in any of the books. I can remember maybe mentioned once in a John Wesley Rawls book, and I actually really like him as an author. But I remember one time it was, oh yeah, they dug a latrine, and that was it. That was all you heard in the whole series of books. So like they say, it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. But shit, man, we watched 9 seasons of The Walking Dead, and they were covered in zombie blood, and they were filthy, and you never saw anyone even reference a bathroom. So the truth is, you are going to die of dysentery or something else out of the Oregon Trail video game long before you ever make it to the apocalypse if you don't know what you're going to do with your own poop. And I love the emphasis on the last P, the poop, but I'm not kidding. All of these diseases that we haven't talked about in the first world for 100 years, they're going to come right back with a vengeance the second your toilet stops flushing. Cholera, dysentery, typhoid fever, hepatitis. I think it's A and E are the hepatitis that are the poop ones. The Bravo and Charlie aren't particularly poop hep, but so in this episode, we are going to talk about all of the different types of sewer and sanitation systems, which is super sexy and exciting, I know. And we're going to talk about the ways to be prepared for the eventual toilet backup. And I know that sounds like just the absolute most mundane thing, but honestly, I can't stress enough that in an SHTF event, your toilet backup is going to kill you. So the first things first, you have to actually know where your sewage goes. How many people actually know where the poop goes when they flush the toilet? It goes down the drain. We all know that. But then what? So
I think it was Ralphie that said it goes down the hole.
it goes down the hole. That's exactly right. It goes down the hole. But then where does it go? So, if you're not on septic, and I think we're going to talk about septic systems as well, because I kind of want to help. I want to cover all the bases. We're going to talk about septic, but if you're not on septic, then you're on basically in the US, you're on one of 3 different kinds of sewer systems. So there's a few different kinds, including sanitary sewers, stormwater sewers, and what they call a combined sewer. And then obviously there's septic systems. So the sanitary sewer, it's also called a foul sewer, but these are systems that carry wastewater from your home to a treatment plant. And they're designed to handle basically just all human waste and then all the easily degradable and biodegradable solids. So basically, it's kind of like the black and gray water from your house.
Okay. So you're talking about the difference between actual biohazard waste being black water and your sink runoff, your soapy water, your shower water, that's called gray water. And I know we dealt with that
Yep.
in theater when I was deployed. Um, a lot of the
You
bases
said
will
in
have
theater, and I thought jazz hands real quick. I totally apologize for all the vets out there. You're like, we dealt with that in theater. I'm like, what, like in the orchestra pit or something? But okay, yeah, go on. Sorry about that.
I was in theater in high school, so
Oh, you were also in theater, so this is a huge issue for me. Oh,
yes,
you're gonna have
shout
to
out to Miss
specify.
Fisher. But yeah, when we were deployed, we had on the larger fobs or the larger bases, there are shower. They're called CHUs, which stands for Combat Housing Unit, and a CHU
Mhm.
can be anything from your actual barracks room to the shower huts to the post commander's office or whatever it is. They're all kind of the same structure, but they have different internals,
Mhm.
so they're very modular. But these CHUs for the shower huts and shower trailers, they had specific tanks that the drains would then get pumped into black water and gray water storage tanks.
Oh,
Because
they actually took it different places.
right, and they were above
Yeah,
ground
okay.
tanks, which they, yeah, every once in a while they would leak, and the contractors would get called out to fix it because they done gone screwed up. But uh, what it was is the shower water and the sink water, because it's just supposed to be dirt and soap and things like
Sure.
that would get going into the gray water, and then your actual biohazard, your urine, feces, things like that are going down the toilet, those would get pumped into the black water ones. And when they got full, they would get pumped into the actual transporter trucks to take it off base, go take it to
Mhm.
the treatment facility. But the gray water could be recycled a few times
Sure.
in the on-site facility versus the black water. And every once in a while, when the contractors were out there, because they were local contractors, a lot of them didn't have a whole lot of experience. It was a bad situation when you got those lines, when they would reconnect them after emptying them, they would mix up which line was going to which tank, which becomes a very big problem if you're trying to recycle water,
Mm.
which is also something to keep in mind when we go a little bit later in the episode, when we talk about a sanitation lifeboat, an
Mhm.
RV. Make sure that you're paying attention to where your lines are going, because you could be killing yourself and never know it.
Yeah, that's actually all a really good point. Because yeah, I say things like black water and gray water, and I appreciate you checking me on that. Because in your house, everything goes to the same place. Everything, whether you flush it down the toilet or it goes down the sink. And like you said, Chris, it's like go down the toilet. That's your black water, and your sink and your shower in your home right now as it exists. That is gray water. And anybody who lives on a boat or has an RV knows the difference between those two things. But a lot of people probably don't. So in a foul sewer, or what they call a sanitary sewer, everything you put in the drain, whether it's the toilet or whether it's the shower, it all goes to the same place. The other one is stormwater sewer. So they call that like a surface water sewer. And these move stormwater directly to like a nearby body of water without any treatment. And
Tho-
so,
Those are the ones that it says like do not dump, drains directly to.
right.
Okay,
Right. Yeah. If you're like in
gotcha.
Florida, like it says that on the drains, it's like on the side of the street. It says don't dump stuff in here because this is just pissing out into the ocean. If there's nothing in here except the rainwater, it hits the blacktop and it goes out into the back to the ocean or into a body of water. So then there's these combined sewers, and they basically handle the wastewater, so the black and gray water, everything from your house, and the stormwater, and they take it all away. Now, for the most part, if your water is running in like a grid down situation, then your sewer is probably all like it's probably working properly. Um, if the city water stops working, then you can always grab a bucket of gray water, like rainwater collected in a cistern or something like that, and dump it in the back of your toilet bowl, and it will flush, right? And I think this is what most of us heard as kids. It's that, you know, basically, you could do this forever. You could go get a bucket of water outside, dump it in the back of the toilet, and then the toilet would just magically flush forever. And this was probably honestly one of like the first pieces of what I would call prepper advice that I received as a child from my grandfather. And I just assumed that you could just always fill the back of your toilet and you could just flush it forever. But this was information from a generation who brought us the slit in the back of the medicine cabinet, and you could just fill it for decades with old rusty razor blades and bloody razor blades, and they would just go forever.
I mean, you might be dating yourself a little bit. So did you just see the slit or did you use the slit?
I grew up in like a craftsman style house that was built in the 20s, and we had the slit. I don't know if anybody ever used the slit, but I do remember remodeling the house as a kid. I wasn't involved really, like it wasn't child labor or anything, but I just remember the walls being ripped out and just a pile of razor blades. And I don't know, I'm assuming that people who listen to this, some of them have to know about this if you're of age, but basically in all these old school, like craftsman style homes in the US, in the back of the medicine cabinet, there was a little slit. It looked like a coin slot. And it was for razor blades. Like our that generation that built those homes, our grandparents, they just assumed that like you could just continue to like put stuff in the back of the medicine cabinet and it would never ever fill up, just rusty razor blade after rusty razor blade forever. I mean, I think I remember reading in like popular mechanics once that if to dispose of the oil in your yard, you just dug a hole, filled it with gravel, and you dump all the old motor oil in. It was that generation of people that said to do this kind of thing. So, it's the same people that were like, you can just fill up a bucket of gray water and dump it in the back of your toilet, and your toilet will just magically flush forever. And unfortunately, I'm here today to tell you that is not the case.
Yeah, that's definitely pre-EPA regulations.
Right. But yeah, so we all kind of thought that, right? And it's funny too, because in these combined sewers where this is kind of what you get in the Pacific Northwest a lot, like in the Portland, Seattle areas, where in the combined sewer system, everything just goes to the water treatment plant, whether it's rain or whether it's from your house. But if it rains really hard and it overwhelms the system, I don't know how the valve part works. Like at some point, it stops going to the sewage treatment plant. And if it rains really hard, then everything, the sewer water out of your house and the surface water of the street just spills into these rivers in the Pacific Northwest. And then they'll have some advisory that says, okay, well, don't go in the river for the next couple of days because the poop from your house is in them.
Yeah.
So that happens in the first world.
Just stay out of the river.
Stay out of the river for a while because it's probably going to catch on fire. But if you are on one of these type systems and the water turns off, then yeah, you can, for some amount of time, you can dump water in the back of the toilet. Your toilet will continue to flush. Now, if you have like a pool or a jacuzzi, this is an excellent use of that water because one, it's already treated with like chlorine and bromine, and two, so it's not going to get scummy in the house, right? But two, it's not drinkable. Like you weren't going to do anything with that wastewater anyway. It was just going to sit in the hot tub or the jacuzzi or the pool. So that's a great use of that water, is that you can just go get a 5-gallon bucket, dump in the back of the toilet, and it will flush your toilet for some amount of time. But in a situation where the grid is going to be down for an extended period of time, your sewer system it's going to be overrun and it's going to be compromised, and you're basically on borrowed time. So if you live in...
And that's where I got to jump in here because that borrowed time is a big component. The most places around the U.S. actually use water towers for larger cities. And
Sure.
they're between 80 and 90 feet high, right? Well,
Yep.
you get too much higher than that. You would think, well, the water tower, it gets pumped into the water tower. It's this big reservoir, and then it drains down and goes into your supply pipes.
Sure.
And you would think, oh, you can just make it a lot bigger. You can make the water tower higher so you get more on it. Well, if you do that, you can actually blow out the entire system of pipes because the pressure from that 120-foot tower is so much greater than that of an 80-foot tower.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, I didn't think about it like that. Yeah.
So if you think about it, when you look at that water tower, if all of a sudden grid down and those pumps have nothing going up into the tower,
Mhm.
that is your entire town's water supply right there. And you can think of that as a big level because everybody using the water is going to drop it a lot faster.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it's a good point that even when like the pumps turn off, there's some amount of water just from gravity feed, like you're talking about. Eventually, that goes away. So if you live in most of, I would say like the northern U.S. or anywhere that has like a fairly low water table, then all the wastewater it probably leaves your home using gravity, at least for a good part of the journey. And then the sewer line from your house goes downward, like at a super slight angle, and then dumps into like a larger sewer where the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles used to live. Or maybe they still do. I have not checked in on them in a while, but that kind of bigger sewer. And, and then as they say, I'm just trying to give a visual here, but then as they say, the shit rolls downhill. So eventually, there's a pump somewhere. Eventually, it probably just doesn't keep going down and down and down. It has to be pumped to like a wastewater treatment station. So what I'm saying is if you have a little bit of time before it starts to really truly back up in your home. Now, if you live in the south or somewhere with a higher water table, you likely have a lot less time to make these arrangements. Like, remember, everyone else in town, everyone else in your neighborhood, all these other people, they have the same idea as you. They're still dumping water into the back of their toilet, and they're still flushing, and they're running stuff down the sink, and they're running the shower, and they're running the tub. But without the water being directed by gravity or pumps, it's eventually going to back up. So, Chris, I remember I gave you some homework before this. So down there in the Tennessee Valley, do you know where your wastewater goes now from your home?
It took some research, but yes.
Mm-hmm.
So we live in a neighborhood. It's a relatively newer built neighborhood. Roughly, we'll call it 750 to 1,000 homes. So your
Yeah,
normal
yeah,
suburban
it's a
neighborhood,
bunch. Sure.
what you would see on the overhead flights, going into a town or on TV.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's a pretty high water table here in the Tennessee Valley, so you don't have to dig extremely far to hit water. Because of that, th- there are two pump stations in our neighborhood, and basically, pump station one is for the upper third of the neighborhood. Pump station two is for the second third, and then there's a third one further on down the line for the last third. But
Mm-hmm.
everything goes downhill, like you said. So those pump stations, they take everything from point one and they drive it upwards so that it can drift down to point two, drive everything upwards so that it can continue on down across the road and onto the next uh, pump station.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the trouble is when people flush or wash, their food scraps down the drain that aren't broken down by the disposal, or they flush diapers, the baby wipes that are not
Yep.
immediately biodegradable. And by
Sure.
immediately biodegradable, we're talking like 15 minutes, not 10 hours. Um, those pipes, they're only so big, and so when something gets in there, like a diaper, the pump can't handle it, and everything before that pump station will back up. So you got 300 homes that are all relying on that one lift station, and the pump can't handle a diaper because one negligent person decided, I'm just going to toss it in the toilet instead of in the trash,
So
and it
that's
screws
crazy
everybody.
because yeah, because we're talking about I'm merely talking about the water, the eventual water backup, but now you're saying that like where you live, it's not just the water backup, but you also have issues with maintenance. Like if no one goes to work that day and maintains that pump station or that lift station, then you're going to be shit out of luck like way before anybody else simply because you have basically the amount of space in your sewer from the time all of those homes pre first lift station get to that first lift station, right?
Exactly. And it's not just that, because the pumps for those lift stations, they work on our main electrical grid. So if the grid goes
Right.
down, it can't lift it for the
Right.
lift station to operate correctly.
Yep.
And now, yeah, and everything just kind of backs up and piles up. Um, if you don't have training to work on those lift stations,
Mhm.
you're probably going to hurt yourself and cut yourself and end up needing antibiotics or get gangrene in your tongue or something like that. But it's one of those things where one person's negligence can really affect the entire neighborhood if something happens, and it's a shitty situation, for lack of a better term.
Right. I feel like there's going to be a lot of these double entendres the whole time, but no, you're right. You're right. So that's the thing. So it's so imperative that you find out where your wastewater goes. Like your treatment plant, like Chris's, it probably has like a backup generator. So if you're a forward-thinking community organizer, maybe you can assemble a group of people now and have a plan to keep those pumps running or working for your neighborhood. Or maybe you can figure out if you're on a combined storm and sewer system, and you can figure out how to maybe redirect that water into a river now. Um, as this is usually kind of how the combined and dedicated storm systems work. But i- if you don't have a means to keep your community sewer working, then you need a plan. Like, and before we go into those plans, let's talk about those of you that might be on a septic system. Like I'm on a septic system, and you guys are obviously you guys are in a better situation for like a long-term grid down event, but it's certainly not a permanent solution. Eventually, a septic system has to be pumped, and that's going to be a pretty heavy lift in any SHTF situation. So, like I said, I'm on septic, and there are a few simple kind of pragmatic steps that I can take now to keep my system running longer if it needs to. Like, keep treatment on hand, like Ridex or something like that, which it's usually, if you aren't familiar, it's usually some kind of like a flushable product that aids in the creation and maintenance of this good bacteria, and then it eats literally all of the crap in your systems. Um, and just be careful, like only put biodegradable stuff, like Chris talked about, the baby wipes. Only put like the biodegradable stuff in your system. Don't let the ladies put their old tampons down there, right? Because that again can be an issue. So there's also a couple of different kinds of septic systems, and some are better than others for like the long-term power outages. Like a regular septic tank, like the one I have, it's entirely gravity fed. The sewer line from the house goes downhill, and it goes into a big giant buried tank, usually like a 5-gallon tank, in some cases a 1,000-gallon tank. I'm lucky enough to be on a larger tank. Basically, there's a layer of sludge on top. It's called the scum layer. And this ideally is being broken down constantly and eaten by the treatments that you're putting in it. And then the liquid on the bottom is just sort of draining out on a drain field under your yard. But if you're somewhere with like a high water table and you also happen to be on septic, then you might have something like a sand filter system, which in the long run, it's kind of arguably better, but it may actually require a pump to move the waste up through your system and into the sand pit. So if you are like a sand pit filter type septic system and you lose power, and you've got like I said, like this active system like this, you basically only have enough space for the waste until the drain line of your pump is full. So the diameter of that pipe down to the pump, that's kind of all you have. Now, whether you're on like the normal gravity fed system or a sanitary sewer or the normal septic with or a combined system with lift stations or whatever it is, there's going to be signs that you're filling up and you're getting close to backing up. The big one's always the smell. The first most common sign that there's some kind of sewage backup is going to be that it's going to smell like crap. Obviously, if your sinks and your toilets, if those kind of things start to overflow, then it's too late. But if you have like the gurgling noises, the slow drains, the puddles, like pooling of water places, maybe a sinkhole developing in the front lawn, mold, mildew growth, and the big ones like insect activity, then you know that it's coming, right? So you have an idea that I'm on borrowed time right now.
So you have to look at your outside indicators to know whether or not you already have a problem versus, oh, there's poo coming up through the basement. We need to fix this. It's already too
That
late at that point.
That's exactly right. No, you have to take a look at what's going on out in your yard, and you'll know. Like the bugs is a big one. You'll get insect activity. So like during Katrina, I had a buddy who they were pretty close to ground zero. Like they were in New Orleans, and they were pretty well prepared, so they didn't evacuate. But because of the extremely low elevation and the high water table in that area, the sewer backup happened like pretty quickly once the lift stations lost power. So this can happen for anybody kind of in the south. That if you're on a high water table and a lower elevation, it's probably gonna happen to you pretty quick once you lose power and once the backup generators on those lift stations lose power. So one trick that they used to control the smell, they would seal their drains. So the drains they weren't using, you could tape like visqueen down over them, like over the bathtub and the sinks. And that bought them a little bit of time, but eventually they did end up having that black water back up into their home, and it became unlivable. They had to leave. So
And that's really one of those things where it's not just a disaster that can cause this. Like you need to keep your drains and your lines clear from, we've had sewers get tree roots growing through them, the old clay
oh sure,
pipes in one of our old
that's
houses.
super common. Yep.
Um, and yeah, it rained maybe a quarter of an inch, but over that much space, it backed up that line because there was a tree root in it. And that's one of those things we never even thought of until it was too late, and then it became a $12,000 fix.
Yeah, that's super common. And it's funny you say that 'cause that happened in my childhood home as well. It was an older home with these clay pipes and the tree roots grew through. So there probably were some outside indicators that that was probably happening. Like you said, being cognizant of those outside indicators. But like you said, yeah, okay, it was expensive. It was 12 grand to fix it. But at least in your situation, there was someone there who could fix it. In a long-term SHTF situation, no one's fixing that. No one's showing up at your house with a backhoe and replacing a clay pipe. It's just not going to happen. So you absolutely have to have a plan now because it's eventually you're going to find yourself in that type of situation. So, and then you're going to be exposed to the black water and the bacteria and all those kinds of things. So how do you know if you've been exposed to the deadly bacteria that lurks in your poo? Well, you know, most of the symptoms are kind of the common bacterial infection stuff that I mentioned, like, the standard nastiness, like you're going to have watery diarrhea, vomiting, the cholera makes you super thirsty, which is kind of weird, muscle cramps, weakness. Luckily, most of these can be treated with antibiotics, with the exception, I think, of hepatitis. I don't know if there's like an antibiotic treatment for that, but I don't think that is particularly treatable. But either way, you know, how how about you just like maybe not expose yourself to black water, right? Like maybe just don't do that. So, um, you
And
know,
there are definitely some workarounds if you do find yourself accidentally exposed. I mean, we did talk about them last episode with the antibiotic kits that you can get
oh
from
sure,
Jace Medical and
yeah,
Contingency Medical.
bo-
And
both of those guys, absolutely, yeah. I purchased them myself, and I mean, that literally, I hear a lot of people talking about that's expensive. Those are, 250, $300 for all these rounds of antibiotics that we talked about in episode 7. But dude, that is cheap money to like not die right now. Like you're exactly right.
it's not just cheap to keep you alive. This is your last ditch effort to stay alive, and you may not have that medical support to go in and get IV antibiotics. So
Yeah,
something from Jace Medical, one of their kits, or something from Contingency Medical. If Jace is out or if Contingency's out, likelihood that the other one is going to have it
sure.
is there. If you get it now, then you have it on hand and just let it kind of sit there with the instruction manual. It comes with the entire
Yep,
med deck.
that's
They're
right.
fantastic.
Yeah, so I think it's funny because we did talk about I think they have a pretty good shelf life. I think antibiotics, I don't quote me, maybe it's a year, maybe it's 2 years, but from what I know about antibiotics, if they're kept in like a cool, dry, non-moist environment, yeah, it says it's only good for a year or 2 years, but you could get more time out of those. Maybe the efficacy dwindles, but it's not like you throw them out on the expiration date. They still may definitely save your life if you're going to be in one of these, black watery type situations, right?
I completely agree. And that's one of the things that this is all about planning and mitigating and what you can
Yep.
do ahead of time. So,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's definitely a few different ways, but I mean, what would you say are the best ways to go about this, AC?
Yeah, so I mean, as far as mitigation here's the thing: is like I said, I'm trying to this is a scare tactic. Eventually, in a long-term grid down situation, your poop is going to come back out of the toilet. That is just a fact. Okay, so how do we mitigate that? How do we plan for this? Well, there's a few different ways. I think the easiest slash cheapest is dig a hole, and having the ability and the tools necessary to dig an outhouse or a latrine if you need this, it's probably the single most basic thing you can do if you plan on staying put once the sewers themselves stop working. So like they say, a 5 or 6 foot deep hole is usually enough to get the waste away from you, and then it's probably going to keep like the tapeworms from crawling back up into your butthole. I honestly don't know if that's true. I just read that somewhere, but so if you've got enough able-bodied people in your group and you have enough shovels, you can make this happen. And Chris, like, I feel I've never been in the military. I kind of feel like this is the military way to go. Like, well, just dig a hole, right? We got enough shovels. I think Eisenhower said, like, if you got enough e-tools, you can do it or something. But yeah, if you've got enough shovels, dig the fucking hole, right? But like in the army, where you're maybe in a more rudimentary fob or somewhere away from sewers or running water, what would the army do?
So I do have experience with this on forward operating bases and JSSs, which are um, basically small fobs.
Okay.
JSS is a joint security station, so that was an individual company working with locals. Kind of a smaller. The fob is going to be your larger area that has actual support personnel. It's not off in the middle of fucking nowhere like we were.
Sure.
Um, but some of those small encampments, a lot of what we saw was really the military has a variety of latrine systems for different situations. So one of the first ones that you see, other than just grab your e-tool and dig a little cat hole, take a
Hmm.
dump and cover it back up. You have what's called the Modular Initial Deployment Latrine, or the MIDL. It's a portable mobile system that can be deployed with troops. And it's not your porta-john. It is a very specific small unit trailer. So it's only about
Okay.
8 stalls wide, and it's very, very small. And you basically run a backhoe underneath it, set it down, and you're done.
Oh, so it's like a trailer and system that's just got a bunch of toilets in it, but you are still digging the latrine. You're pooping into the ground at that point.
Yes, and then you
Okay.
have the next level up, which is your maturing theater latrine. It's a more stable system that becomes available after the initial deployment. So you have the tanks that hold water so that you can wash your hands
Oh,
um,
sure.
after you go to the bathroom. It has
Yep.
the soap dispensers and things like that. Then you have the follow-on latrine, which is really that containerized system. It's got sinks, mirrors, toilets. It's going to be kind of your gravity-fed, solar heated showers. Those are kind of what you'll see in the follow-on latrines. So we're getting larger and larger.
Okay.
There's
This is the scalable thing we talk about. You're going up.
exactly.
Okay.
Um, Going back down the line, you have deep pit latrines, which those are for your extended stays. They're box seats. They're covered with dirt. This is kind of when you can't dig for that modular initial deployment latrine. So
Mhm.
either the ground isn't stable enough or the water table is too high or something like that. Um,
Okay.
There's also in extremely temporary bivouac sites, maybe 1 to 3 days, you'll see either a straddle trench or a slit trench latrine. Sometimes those are just somebody ran a 6-inch wide, 2-foot deep trench, and then they lash together some sticks, and you're sitting on the back of a log, the drop and plop.
Yep.
And then there's the one that gets the most attention, and I hated this detail with a passion. I did do this detail. It sucks. The burnout latrine. So this is they are sometimes wood, sometimes metal, sometimes plastic, sometimes cardboard. But it's basically an outhouse where you've got a big wash basin, a big metal wash basin underneath it. And when it gets full, you mix in diesel fuel or JP8 or jet fuel or gasoline or whatever you have and light it on fire and start stirring. And if you get stuck on shit pit detail, you did something wrong or there's nobody else to do it. It's
I bet that smells worse than Arby's.
for sure. And here's the cool thing is anytime you light it up at night, because it's not a fast detail. It's not going to be 15 minutes and you're done. This is 4 or 5 hours of doing this. As the sun sets, the smoke tends to call the wind and you get mortar strikes because they know exactly what you were doing, where you were doing it, how long you've been doing it for. So mortars will come in over the wall, and they are trying to hit your shit pit.
Of course, you're literally calling the wind for them.
Exactly. Then you get into your contractor ordered portable latrine. These are your porta-johns. They can be on fobs, they can be on JSSs, they can be out in the middle of nowhere, they can be at art festivals and Renaissance festivals and Burning Man or
That's like the
wherever.
rolling latrine that I've seen, right? It's kind of like, it looks like a nice bathroom, but it's on a trailer, right?
No, these are just the single drop-off porta-johns that you can order.
Oh, these are literally just the little honey buckets.
Yep, and they will
okay.
they will order 500 at a time and put them in 20 to 30 sections or blocks, and then they'll take the trailer off to someplace else and drop off another 20 and drop off another 20 and things like that.
Oh my gosh.
And obviously in a shit hits the fan situation, you're not going to be able to call up your local contractor and be like, hey, can I get a Smurf kiss on the butt cheek from one of your portable latrines? I'd really like that right now. They're not going to be answering the phones. So it's one of those things you really have to deal with as it happens.
Right. And it's funny, like, also you mentioned all of these different ways that the military dealt with it. And that's kind of what I expected is none of that is sustainable because the military kind of, I'm not going to say has infinite resources and people, but they have enough to make it seem infinite where they've got diesel to spare. And in a long-term Teotihuacan event, you don't have diesel fuel to spare to burn your poop with, right? And you don't have, infinite amount of manpower to go dig these holes. So in this long-term SHTF event, all of the things you just mentioned, with the exception of digging the hole, it's just plain out not sustainable, right? So, you have to keep in mind, even if you stop using the toilet inside your home, you still have to have a plan in place for like your gray water, just the sink water and stuff. You are probably still going to dump that down the drain, still go down your sink or your shower. And even at that, it doesn't mean your neighbors haven't stopped using their drain lines. And as they say, the shit rolls downhill. So in an extreme, a long-term SHTF event, if you are going to stay put, you need to come up with a way to kind of disconnect the gray and the black water so it doesn't go down the street. Because in your home, if you're doing all the right things, and your neighbors aren't doing all the right things, then eventually their black water is going to back up inside your home, even if you completely stop using your drain. So, you know, I get it. Digging a hole is not the easiest, or I don't know. Maybe I should say that it is not the easiest, but it is the simplest because it does sound like a shit ton of work. But there are some other things you can do, especially if you start planning now. And, we always like to make these things scalable, right? I think we like to start with what's the easiest thing you can do and where can you go from there? And one of the big ones, composting toilets, is a great place to start. And anyone who listens to this, go ahead, were you going to say something?
I love the idea of composting toilets, and I was going to say, yeah, you can't just dig a hole and call it sustainable. I mean, yeah, if you don't want stuff backing up into your home,
Yeah.
you can always shove that expanding foam down into your main sewer line, but then you can't use your water
Oh,
either.
yeah, that's a good call. I would hate to tell someone to do that, but you're exactly right that like if you wanted to totally just shut your house off from the rest of the world, you could, yeah, maybe some spray foam in the lowest part, like in a clean out in the basement or something, like in the lowest part of your home. You could probably do a pretty good job of sealing your home off. And then that black water is going to bounce on the other end of that, but you're not gonna have your neighbor's black water come into your home. But you're right. At that point, you've decided that you are done using your indoor kitchen and your indoor shower and your indoor toilet. And eventually, I mean, truly, that is what you're going to have to do. You're going to have to make a call to stop doing that kind of stuff and move some of that outside. So, like I
And
was saying,
that's not a call you really want to make because you can't
no,
fix it once it's done.
that's right. Yeah, no, you've decided that now you have this outdoor kitchen, and it's not kind of the glamorous Street of Dreams thing. It is a less glamorous version of the outdoor kitchen, but the composting toilet. And anybody who listens to this who has a composting toilet knows that it's not just a set it and forget it type thing. I think that a lot of people are like, oh yeah, man, I'll just be off grid. I'll go get a composting toilet. I'll be good. It's not exactly how it works. There's a lot of maintenance that goes into composting toilets. A lot of them do kind of require some daily maintenance if you want to avoid the odors, and some like septic conditions, the health conditions we talked about, the health hazards. So, this includes things like, I don't know, removing the debris from what they call the fecal cone. It sounds like a dirty job. The odor, if it's not maintained properly, composting toilets can produce odors. And it can be worse than like your standard toilet. There's obviously the whole waste removal component. So that waste must be manually removed and disposed of. Hopefully it's kind of biodegradable by then. There's some capacity issues. A lot of composting toilets that I've used, they do have some capacity issues. They're not meant for like the family of 6 using it all day long. It just doesn't work like that. And then some of them do require power source. So if you're gonna have a composting toilet, you do need to think about that, or it's like a manual crank thing to kind of stir it up. And then there's an installation issue that some of those require like a 2-level installation. So the toilet might be somewhere, and then the holding tank, the composting part might be somewhere else. So there are a few different types, but a lot of them involve like some kind of medium, like wood chips. So think about it. You need a way to make wood chips if that's what you want to do, if you want to have that kind of composting toilet. Also, if you plan on actually like using the compost, and that's kind of, I'm using quotation fingers, but if you plan on using the compost, you need to be conscious of the type of wood chips you're using. So most people use cedar because it smells better, but a lot of those softwoods, like the cedars and the hemlocks, they're super acidic. So if you want to use that human compost, that, I don't know what they call it, like the night soil or whatever, you want to use that for garden soil, then you probably want to use a hardwood chip. And then again, you probably want that for something else. I'd rather use my hardwood chips for like, smoking pork butt or something. But and then you'll still have a disposal issue.
You brought up night soil.
Am I using that term right? Is that what that is? I'm talking about like when people like use their poop and garden with it, right?
Yeah, so we're gonna go really, really historical back to the 9th through 13th century. Uh,
You're totally going to get literally medieval on me right now.
yes, I am going to go
Okay,
medieval on you.
go
The
for it.
night soilman, that was
Mhm.
a profession for cleaning out the nobles' loos or latrines or, their shit pits. It was
Yeah,
also called a gong farmer, and they
that's
would,
kind of cool.
it, I mean, if you're gonna have a cool name, sure, go
It's
for it.
it sounds like a garage band from Seattle, doesn't it?
Kind
I
of.
think they opened for Nirvana once. Yeah, the Gong Farmers.
But yeah, they were some of the highest paid in the medieval era. They were some of the highest paid and richest people in communities, and to the point where they actually had more in monetary assets and just free cash on hand than the nobles they were serving, because they would get paid to scoop the latrines or scoop the splatter pits,
Yep.
or the the sump pits that the nobles were using. They would get paid to load that onto a cart and take it away.
Okay.
Then they would compost it using wood chips. They would mix it with cow dung. They would mix it with
Mhm.
all sorts of other stuff. And then they would resell it to the farmers who would fertilize their fields. So they were getting paid 2 to 3 times for scooping out and storing poop on their own property. And yeah,
Wow.
it's a really shitty job,
Mhm.
not to overplay that pun, but they were making it pretty well. So if you're looking for a job in SHTF, you may as well get historical.
It probably doesn't require a ton of skill, but remember, didn't Matt Damon do this in Martian?
Oh
Right?
yeah, yeah,
In
yeah,
The
yeah.
Martian, didn't he literally like, take the poop and then like grow potatoes with it?
Yep. He was the
Yeah.
first person to colonize Mars because he grew crops.
Because he grew crops. That's right. So, and he did it with human poop. So, yeah. So you could, I guess there is a way to do that. Now, the way I understand a composting toilet, and I don't own one, the way I understand them is that they kind of do it. They call it hummus, like when it turns, biodegrades a little bit and kind of turns into this nutrient rich, less smelly thing. So you can, I think, buy this, these kinds of composting toilets probably do a better job of sort of speeding that up and allowing you to use your waste to garden. I mean, I garden with chicken poop all the time, and again, I'm kind of conscious about the kind of wood chips I put in the chicken coop because the more acidic, the softer woods that do smell a little better are worse for some of the garden crops. So I think you do need to be conscious of that in a composting toilet situation where you don't want to use a medium that would kind of counteract what you're trying to do with the waste. But you're right, you can use human waste and garden with it. And I know I don't know if this is true, so maybe someone can correct us. But I've been told this, like when you travel to Latin America and places where they use, even in Asia, where they may use this night soil to garden, is that you need to be careful to kind of wash your fruits and vegetables. If it's something that you don't eat the outside of, like an orange or a watermelon, you're probably safe. But if it's something that you eat the outside of, like apples or plums or peaches, you probably need to be very careful about washing that because you can introduce that kind of bacteria into the equation that we talked about because if it's not properly broken down, right?
A lot of vegetables are like that. So vegetables, especially things like carrots, lettuce,
Hmm.
anything that draws directly from the soil. Yeah, if it's night soil fermented, for
Hmm.
lack of a better term, it can draw toxins directly into the
Oh,
part that you're eating. And
yeah.
regardless of how much you wash it, you're not gonna get all the way down to it.
Yeah, that's interesting. So anyway, something to think about. Now, oh, did you hear the story? I remember this. This is true. You can check me on this. That there was a North Korean soldier that defected. He ran over the line, and I think he got shot a couple of times and defected from North Korea. And
Which
he
one?
had like, yeah, exactly. Which one? This was recent-ish history in the last couple of years. And he they got in the hospital. I think he had been shot a couple times, and he had like a bunch of intestinal worms, like a shit ton of these intestinal worms and stuff going on, and they attributed that to the fact that North Korea uses human feces in all of the food they grow. And so he had all of these intestinal worms and parasites because of that. So yeah, you need to be careful about that. And again, that's the kind of thing we're having something like a Jace case or a contingency medical, round of antibiotics on hand is probably going to keep you alive a lot longer. So that's the composting toilet part. There are a couple other ways we can mitigate the poo issue. One of them is an incinerating toilet. Now, I actually have one of these. I think it's called a Cinderella. It's crazy expensive. This is in my non-disclosed location cabin in the middle of nowhere. And the reason I went with the incinerating toilet is because if you are somewhere where it's too cold, the composting thing doesn't work. You can't use a composting toilet when it's cold. You cannot turn your shit into fertilizer when it's a turd sickle. You can't do it. It has to be warm. So
that might explain why North Korea has problems with it. Is it's a very cold country.
It's a cold place, so maybe they have a problem composting. Yeah, if it's just frozen, it's going to be an issue. So I've heard a lot of people say, you can have if you're in a cold climate and you want to use a composting toilet, you can like move it inside a greenhouse and hopefully kind of help the thing, help it do its thing. Now, an incinerating toilet, awesome, and you can get a 12-volt one, but they do run on propane. So I have one. It is very expensive, and I'm embarrassed to say how much I paid for it, but this thing is amazing. It's got a catalytic converter in it that literally it turns your poop. It burns your shit and turns it into just like misty nothingness. It smells like nothing. This exhaust fan, the fan is 12-volt powered, and the burner is propane powered. So you do need propane, right? That's kind of an issue in the end of the world. But these are an awesome option, and they will support this little tiny toilet will support like a family of 4. I think it's something like 25. Well, I'm going to use flushes a day, using quotation fingers, but it's an amazing piece of tech. It is like super high-end poop tech. But again, you need propane, which might be kind of hard to come by. And it does require some power, but a 12-volt battery solar thing. But the incinerating toilet is an option. They do have some really high power, like 220-volt ones. I've been on a couple of Coast Guard cutters that have these incinerating toilets, and but they just require a ton of power. Like this is, like 3-phase power to get rid of your shit. But
Gotcha.
it'll make it go away,
Well, and another solution, not, quite possibly as expensive if you're buying new, but an RV or a camper as that kind of lifeboat, kind of that medium-term, mid-term solution.
100%.
You don't have to design the toilet, and yeah, you probably still should dig a hole if you can't find a KOA campground or anything like that, but it is a lifeboat, so you've got to be careful about your black and gray water. You still have to dig the hole. Technically, you could just drive down the road and let it spill everywhere if you're that kind of asshole, but but the big thing about an RV camper is in most cases in modern homes, your food is in your kitchen, your toilet is in your bathroom, and there is a separating layer between the two. In an RV, your black water, your gray water, your toilet, your kitchen, your cutting surfaces, everything is so close to each other. It's a lot easier to get that cross-contamination. And this is something that people do every day and don't even think about. They, cut up raw chicken on their cutting board, and then they're like, oh, I want to add onions. And so they slice onions on the same cutting board without washing it first. And you get that cross-contamination, and they throw half an onion in a plastic bag and back into the refrigerator where it can just ferment salmonella. And people get sick all the time from food poisoning. And it's a problem in today's society from people not paying attention. But imagine how much worse that could be in a shit hit the fan kind of scenario.
So much worse. You're exactly right. That's kind of, again, we're plugging the antibiotics a lot, but again, that's where something like that, it's a good idea to have. But again, just to keep it sanitary, like you said, just make sure you're cleaning stuff off. And in a long-term SHTF event, you might not have all of those, Clorox wet wipes, you might run out of that stuff. So it might be kind of harder to decontaminate an area. But what you said about an RV or a camper, that's a great idea, because with that, you still have to dig a hole probably, but you don't have to reinvent the toilet. You have a place where you can use the bathroom. You've got this flushing system. It's probably got a 12-volt system you can power with solar. And then in an RV, it does, like a boat, it does actually separate your black water and your gray water. So the black water, you're going to have to dig a hole, but it's a small hole, right? You've got a 4 or 6 inch diameter pipe that's going to come out of there. The gray water, depending on what you're putting in the sink and the shower, you may be able to recycle that water. You might be able to use that in your garden or something like that. You might be able to actually reuse some of that water. So you're exactly right. An RV or a camper makes a really good sort of medium-term sanitation lifeboat, even if you're not mobile. Just having it there on your property where you can use that toilet, you can flush the toilet, that black water can go away. You've got a hole you can dig and get rid of that, and then maybe you can reuse that gray water for something else.
You could also be like Cousin Eddie in Christmas Vacation and just
How have we not brought that up yet? We're like 58 minutes into this thing and we haven't said shitter's full yet. I'm embarrassed that we haven't done that yet, honestly. For shame on us, Chris. We should have referenced we should
Love
have
it.
absolutely referenced Christmas Vacation by now. You're right, because at some point shitter's full. Now, lastly, the coolest thing I have seen in terms of poop tech, the poo technology, maybe that is a new sector, poop tech, but the coolest thing is the biogas toilet. And I don't know if you've heard of one of these. This is crazy. It's that, and I don't know
haven't.
why I don't know why I don't own one yet, but so it's this kind of eco-friendly toilet that basically converts your waste into clean energy. What it is a toilet with a big giant black balloon attached to it. And what it does, it can sustain up to like 25 flushes a day, which is kind of ideal for 4 people. And it gives you renewable energy. Your waste goes into this toilet, it goes into this big black balloon, and then it will produce biogas, essentially methane. It's producing methane. So you can actually use this energy. Now, if you've got like a generator or a camp stove or something like that, they aren't set to run on methane. You generally would you'd have to like rejet, that is what they call it, meaning that you need to allow more gas into the generator, because this methane, as it exists, as it is produced out of something like a biogas toilet, it has a lot less energy, a lot less BTUs than like, your propanes or your natural gas or that kind of stuff. So you would likely have to rejet these things so they could run off. Actually, that's a lie. I think natural gas and methane may be similar, but propane has a lot more BTUs, and maybe butane. I can't remember. All I remember Hank Hill saying butane is a bastard gas, but I can't remember why we don't like butane. But anyway, so yeah, you may have to rejet some of those appliances so it allows more gas into them. But this biogas toilet is crazy, and they pack up this big giant black balloon thing, and they pack up pretty small. So like if I had an extra, $1,700 laying around right now, rather than buying another AR-15 and another bajillion rounds of 5.56, I would probably buy myself a biogas toilet and have that on hot standby for when shit hits the fan. So, listen, regardless of how you plan to deal with your poop, it's important to understand like just how incredibly critical this is and how dangerous it is to not plan for what you're going to do with your poop. And this, this is also kind of to highlight how absolutely important it is to make sure you have things like antibiotics on standby in case you do need them and you do bump into your black water. But just thinking about this, that like I said when we started, it's always these same 5 items that I hear any self-described prepper talk about. It's always like the food, water, shelter, warmth, and weapons. You gotta have You got to have 1,000 rounds of 5.56. You're not going to survive the apocalypse. And I cannot stress enough that it does not matter how many rounds of ammunition you have, because you are going to die of dysentery before the marauders ever show up at your door. It's so incredibly important. If you think that it's those 5, and I know everybody out there is kind of thinking about those 5, it's got to be 6. It just has to be, because that sanitation aspect is equally as important as all of those other 5 things. And it is equally as important as all of those other, the mental aspect, the training. If you think that having bushcraft is important in an SHTF event, I have news for you that you're going to die of dysentery while you're making that cool Amish chair. Like, it's just, you have to have some way to deal with it.
And coming from experience, I can tell you, you are 110% right, because having had dysentery in country, it's so hard to try to focus on not crapping your pants when you're in a firefight that you can't pull the trigger because you're so focused on something else. You're basically combat ineffective at that point. So if you think you're gonna just lone wolf this with your 1911 and your M1 carbine and a bucket full of toilet paper and call it good, I wish you the best, but maybe you can write us in after shit hits the fan and let us know how it goes, because I don't think you're going to be writing anything.
No, you're so right, because I think that is the thing. And yeah, like you said, being able to perform simple tasks if you happen to get something treatable, like, if you have the hepatitis or the dysentery or something, you happen to have the antibiotics and you happen to have something treatable. Right now, you likely have the ability to just take it easy for a couple of days. But in an SHTF event, you probably don't have that ability. Even if you do have the ability to treat it, even if you do have the antibiotics, I think that rest is probably going to be kind of hard to come by. You're probably going to have to be outside. You're going to have to contribute to your group. And yeah, like you said, Chris, you are going to be ineffective if you happen to come down with one of these, sanitation type bacterial infections.
And can you imagine having to play catch up after you have caught, typhoid or cholera or dysentery or whatever? Can you imagine having to go out and dig a hole for a latrine and play catch up with the shit shivers?
Oh my God. Can you imagine? It'd just be terrible. I know that, like, yeah, when I get some simple, viral, bacterial, whatever, and I'm hard down for a couple of days with a fever, I am a little baby. I could not imagine having to do manual labor. I could not imagine having to defend my homestead, or all of these things that you think you're going to do with your, food, water, shelter, warm, weapons, whatever. You are going to be so ineffective without having a plan to deal with your shit. And that's as much as I'm going to say. We have talked literally for like an hour and 10 minutes about poop now. So I can't stress it anymore.
It is one of those things. It's not sexy. It is critical. So keep this in mind and plan accordingly. Just understand we're here for you. So take this all with a grain of salt or with a single wipe of triple ply. But this is all to kind of help you reframe into that scalable mentality of what SHTF event looks like. Just reframe your thinking and always remember that you are your own stakeholder when it comes to your survival. So I think that's probably going to do it. AC, anything else last minute?
Yeah, do you want to, I don't know, do you want to tease episode 9? Do you have an idea about what you want to do next week?
Well, I think we've got to go with another list episode because we are kind of alternating. So
That's right. Yep.
how about unconventional bartering items? in a shit
Yeah,
hits the fan
I
situation.
I would like to do that. That'd be kind of fun. We could come up with some. I honestly, we are not in an SHTF event as far as I know. I barter all the time, and not like haggle, but I mean, as far as like trading people for goods or services, I actually enjoy that. I don't have anything against the dollar, but I do I make eggs and I grow honey and all those kinds of things, and so I do enjoy bartering those things that I happen to have a hand in with my bare hands. And I think that you and I, especially from different sides of the spectrum, we can really come up with we can probably come up with a couple of cool ideas. So yeah, no, I'd like to do that for sure. Let's do that.
Let's do it. All right. Well, you heard AC. We're going to do bartering next week, unconventional bartering items. So just remember, you are your own stakeholder, and we will see you back here next week.